Let's put on our painting hats and have some fun with Monet. And what we are going to paint today is one of his paintings of a channel river, and it's called, let's make sure we pronounce this right because I tried a few times, and it's called, you guys ready to hear it? I'm not gonna even try, but you ready to hear it? Argenteuil. I'm sounding it like Argenteuil. Definitely not pronouncing it French. So we are going to do a fun painting, one of Monet's. And it's the reason why I picked up that painting is because we have almost like 3-4 fields. It depends on how we're looking at it. So big fields. We have sky, we have water, and we have foliage. We have some trees on one side. So we have reflection, which we have to concentrate a little bit more on the reflection of the water. So if you observe a little bit more Monet, you're going to see that he concentrates on a lot of the pictures of the reflection in the waters. And if you look behind the reflection or whatever is the surrounding, it's almost like there is less details. The most important thing is in the water, what's reflecting and how it's reflecting. So he did a pretty good job of doing that. So I created a canvas, and usually I try to create a canvas that is frameable, but this time I just created something that it's a squattier rectangle, and the size, I think it's 7 by 6.5, or a little bit less than 6.5. So I always either come out a little bit of my canvas, or if I decide to frame it, I'm just gonna have it matted and framed. So you guys ready to begin? Let's have some fun with Monet's painting. And pretty much what we have, some fall colors. We have blue, whites, greens, and gray. I didn't need it gray because I have black and white, but I poured gray because I had it and I barely use this color. So we have umber, we have burn and raw umber, we have primary red, we have orange, we have the blues, and we have just deep green. And that's it for the colors. The reason why I picked this, it was a very elementary sketch. So my middle point, or my two fields, important fields, sky and water, it's not a halfway, it's a little bit underneath the halfway. So you have a little bit more of a sky, and then you have water. This is my center approximately. So I'm trying to kind of have quadrants and to figure out where the elements are. So this trees or foliage is starting here and it's going down, passes the other side of the river. It's probably an island, or this is kind of like a little bay looking thing, and then it comes around. So the shape is a rectangle, kind of like a rectangle, and another almost like a rectangle. So 3 different shapes right here. We have a tiny sailboat right here. We're not gonna sketch it because sailboat, triangle, a little line for the bottom, some shadows, we're done. This part here is the other side of the river. It has some sort of buildings or something, you cannot tell because it's obscured, but pretty much that's it. The most important thing for us will be those highlights in the water, those reflections, and playing around with the shadows and the light and the brush strokes. And I'll post his picture a little bit later, are pretty big. So I'm going to start with, I did not pull my brushes, It's okay. So there is a flat, a round, a little bit of a smaller brush, and let's get a angled and another angled brush. Okay, so I'm gonna start with a big flat brush and just dip it in water. And I am going to start with the sky. Again, in the sky, I see brush strokes in all kinds of directions. So I'm going to take this blue and white, more white. And if you have painted a few times with me, you know, oops, wrong color. You know that I try not to overmix my colors because I want all these colors to be present. So the first thing I will do is kind of give it almost like a wash, a little bit more white. And if you see what I'm doing is grayish blue, but very, 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 how many times I said very light color. We don't want this to be too dark. I'm going crisscross, I'm going left to right, I'm going up and down. Pretty much I'm applying it in all kinds of directions. My water, it's a very similar color, but I'm just gonna take a tiny bit more white and I'm gonna create my water. What am I doing for the water? My brush strokes. And you see what I'm using? I'm using the whole side of my flat brush and I'm kind of rubbing it from side to side. A little more water, and I'm gonna go around, and it's a wash, so it's not tons of color. There's more water in here than anything else. And like, you know what I do is I will come out of my canvas. Obviously I don't like to be confined in a rectangle, and that's totally fine, because if I need to do something, I can cut this, I can scan it, I can scan just that area. I can put a matting around it, and I will know that the matting will cover my whole image. I'm not gonna see something that it's not complete. So anyways, let's continue. The next part is I'm gonna put kind of like a base for this, but also there is parts in the trees, because you can see through them, that are that bluish gray. So I'm gonna get a little bit of that, but I'm gonna be even more gentle and watery. So don't overmix. Do you see how I am leaving the colors present? I see all three colors in here. Take a little bit of water, wipe my brush, because I just put a spot there. It was too strong, and I think again it's too strong. So I'm gonna go in here and apply some of that, and my brush is falling apart. My handle is chipping, and I think this brush also is coming off. It's all good. I can still use it. I can still use this baby. Okay, so I have my base for my trees, except the bottom part. So I'm going to take a little bit of green and gray, and I am going to apply this part right here. And let's take a little bit of orange, just tiny bit, and tiny bit of brown. Either brown will work, raw or burned umber. And the burned umber, it just has a little bit more reddish to it than the raw. Okay, so there is that. I'll just blend a little bit. So this is gonna be covered. Most of that is going to be covered, even the sky. So I'm leaving my flat brush alone. I'll give it just a little bit of a wash. And I am going to go to a round. And this round is, if I can see, what number is it? It's 8. So it's a pretty good size round. So I'm gonna go back into my sky and start applying brush strokes in different directions. There is an area where there is a little bit more of a gray cloud. So I'm gonna take gray, because I have it mixed, and kind of apply that gray cloud right here underneath. I see a little bit of white brush strokes. The top, I see blue and white, a tiny bit of the gray, and I'm just gonna go in different directions. Sometimes I'll pick a little bit more white, and more white, tone it down as I go. I'm gonna go back to my gray cloud and I'm gonna apply a little bit more of that right here, looking back and forth between my image and his image, and just trying to get it as close as possible. So this looks like a really nice fall kind of, it's going to rain soon sky. At least that's what it's saying to me. I do feel like there's some sort of a green in there, and I'm just gonna try to add this. Just a tad of green, or maybe tad of yellow in my grayish, or just tiny bit. It's just a feeling when I'm looking at his painting that it's there. I can see it. Maybe I'm the only one seeing that. But the next part will be, I'm gonna go in a little more into my trees, so I don't have that sharp edge where I'm finishing one and starting the other one. So I deleted a tiny bit of that sharp edge between the two areas. Do you see how I smoothed that a little bit better because my edge was too sharp? The next part will be, I'm going to a smaller brush, and the reason why is because our dots on the trees are smaller than the sky. So what is our trees? Trunks are looking purplish, light purple. So I'm going to use blue and red to create that purple, and it's not like the bright purple, so you can use your primary red. Oops, I added a little bit of orange, that's okay, still works. Actually it works pretty good. And I'm gonna start adding few little purplish branches here and there. Now I already know I'm way too strong with my purple, so I'm gonna tone it down with a little bit of white. A lot of times I like to start not as dark, but much lighter than where I should be, because it will be easier to correct something that is, it's much easier to start with a lighter color and darken it than start with much darker color and lighten it. So there is my few branches here that I'm gonna just apply, and I'm gonna darken it a little bit. If you see, the branches are not grounded, they are standing on the top because those trees are much further away, and what we have here on this area is probably bushes, something much shorter. So I'm gonna just put branches. I'm not doing it precisely like his, and that's okay. The idea is taking important elements like the way he's doing his highlights, how he's playing with the water and the reflections. So that is the most important thing. And I'm sure not all of the lines will be like his. It's just, I'm not gonna even try to go there. I'm using him as inspiration. I'm not really gonna try to, let's get this little city right here. Also a little bit of red and brown. and that's the brown is the raw umber that I'm using right now. And I'm going to create a few brush strokes. Do you see how I'm pounding very gently, going around on the canvas and leaving brush strokes? So it's not just one brush strokes, it's many. What are you painting today? I'm painting Monet. So this is a really cool painting. Yes, hi Dimitri. Thanks for watching. So I am just applying brush strokes, not trying to smooth it out. And if you see, because I have the background color, it's already creating a perfect element of where the land begins and grows up, and where the water begins and it's gonna start falling down, or not falling down in reality, but it's going lower than where our trees are. So let's do a little bit more of that faraway area, which could be buildings, it could be boats, it could be so many things. I see something, and let's get a little gray. I see some sort of a building right here. I'm using my imagination. And continue. There is a little bit of yellow. Again with that yellow. I see it. It could be only me, but if I see it, I'll make it. I'll do it. I'm gonna get a little bit of the brown that I mix with the red, and I'm gonna use that. There is one tall or two things that are kind of sticking up. A little more darkness right in this area, so I'm kind of neat in the middle of my top. So that's the quarter of my canvas right there. I see a little bit of a something reflection in the water, so I'm gonna add the reflections much lighter. I'm observing what he's doing and what I am trying to do here, getting it as close as possible. I realize I climbed a little bit higher here, so I'm going to push that down with some white, maybe a little bit of purple, and kind of blend it. So that's that for this area. I'm gonna leave it the way it is right now. Let's add a little bit of yellow. As soon as I say I'm gonna leave it, I go back and I look at it one more time. Now this brush is very tiny, it's A2, so it's gonna take me quite a while to add those brush strokes, and I cannot just blend them. It has to be brush strokes left behind, and it's gonna go between a very palish orangey to yellowish orange, and all the colors are pretty pale. So I'm gonna add a few more branches coming a little down, and I'm using my gray with my raw umber and white, and I'm just gonna add few brush strokes, and I'm gonna leave it in a place where it's acceptable, obviously. So I'm gonna be lifting and putting my brush down with maybe a little bit of a swipe to the left, to the right, whatever, because the tree, the leaves, they don't have direction, so it's going to be better if we don't have only one direction and go in the same pattern as everything else. So we want to move our brush around, and I'm going to get my green. So if I'm using this green, which is so strong, it's gonna stick out, so I'm taking my green and putting it back in this little mess here, which is kind of a grayish brownish, and that's gonna mute it and make it almost like a muddy looking green. I'm gonna steal a little bit of yellow. So I love mixing colors. Please experiment with colors, it will be so helpful one day. the more you play around and see what happens. And every time, if you have questions, I'll love to answer them. Okay, make it look so... Oh, hi, Elizabeth. I hope so, but you should try painting it, it's fun. So I've added a little bit of yellow to my color, and I'm gonna go back in and just move my brush left, right, up, down, apply different pressure because I want my brush strokes not to be the same. The top part of the trees is more of a transparent looking trees than the ones that are much closer. So once I start running out of color, I'm gonna move to the top and I'm gonna use my brush, which is almost empty, to apply this transparent green, and that's just gonna help move things faster. I'm gonna get a little bit more yellow back into that color, so I am pushing it more towards the yellow, and I'm gonna apply a few yellowish brush stroke here and continue playing with that. Let's get a little orange, and when I'm mixing, if you see how I started from here, I made it a little greener, a little yellow. Now I'm getting a little bit of orange. So my palette is moving, my colors, I'm gonna move them around so I can see where I started. So nothing is really mixed right on the top. And again, I'm going to continue here. There is a few longer and bigger brush strokes, and there is tons of little ones. As soon as I start emptying my brush and it's almost like there's not much paint left, I'm gonna start going on the top part of the trees, and it's still too much paint, so I'm gonna go offload on the bottom and just gently brush on the top so it gives me that transparency. So a little more brown. We're using the raw umber. Where am I gonna put it? Back into that same color. I'm going halfway on the orange, so my palette, it's continuing. I'm gonna wipe a little bit my brush because it's too dark of a color, but I want part of that color right there, and I am going to add some little dots and spots and swipes and wipes and continue growing those trees. And this area is not as important again as our water, because it's all about our water. Hi Jody. And I'm gonna continue adding a few, and now I'm holding my brush directly on top of my canvas because I want to use that pointy tip for little tiny deposits of color, and move across. I'll take a little bit of the burned umber. So we have raw and burned umber, and I'm gonna apply a little bit of darkness. I'm gonna have to take the burned umber with a tiny bit of red. Let's add a little bit of orange. So when I start mixing colors, I know what I want to see. And do I want it a little reddish? Do I want it a little more brownish? I'm adding a little bit of white in here, and a little bit of white goes a long way. And now I have kind of a muted reddish brownish color, and I'm gonna go in and continue building. It's gonna be building and building. A little more here. Continuing down. tiny little spots, I'm gonna have to go straight down on my canvas. Too much water, no problem. We'll just take a little bit away from that. And this is one of those paintings that it might get, that process might be a little bit too long of a process for some. You can shorten it. Now, do you see right here how I deposit a little spot that for me, it looks way too dark. So what I'm gonna do is I'll touch it with my finger and I'll take some of the paint away. Now you can do this with a napkin. It's totally fine, but I am doing it with my hands. I love using my hands when I paint. It's a personal thing. Let's get a little bit of blue in our brown. How about that? And you're gonna see what color that's gonna create. Okay. It's a beautiful shadow. It's like a muddy blue. And build in this foliage. Okay, perfect. I'm adding a little, using that shadow, beautiful color to get some of the branches pop out a little bit more. And you see how that start looking more like trees, and we are not even done. I need some purple. So I'm gonna push my purple. I'm gonna push my purple towards that green. And now I'm gonna use purplish green. I think I'm gonna push a little more green in it. Purplish green. Take some of the paint off. Like, I don't want it to be heavy brush on paint. And add a tiny bit of that. So the dark colors will make our things more like they're hidden behind. The light colors will push them forward. And that's pretty much your shadows and your light. So it's the illusion that you're creating when you're painting, that things are three-dimensional when you start adding shadows and light. Okay, so last week we painted Monet, and it was Monet's Lemons, and I'll show you in a second so I can distract myself, step away from the art for 2 seconds and show you what we did last week. Okay, so I got the yellow and the orange and a little bit of white, and I am going to just add a little bit more of a highlight. There's sirens passing by. I'm so sorry. I hope everybody's okay. And so I'll be looking at from my painting back and forward to the inspiration image, and just checking to see how far am I going away from it or close. And that's going to be pretty much my journey to the end of the painting. This is what I'm going to be doing, going and looking back and forward. And a lot of times you'll be checking at your inspiration. It doesn't matter if it's still art, somebody else's art, or whatever you're painting out there, something that it's in movement, like a little child. You're going to be going back and forward between whatever you're painting and your own artwork, your own piece, to kind of figure it out. where you are and how much you need to push yourself to get as close as possible. Mixing grays, so I'm just trying to get a little more gray in here into the trees. Just a tad, not much. Going to red and orange. Wiping that brush a little bit so it's not totally loaded, and applying some of the orange. They are fall trees, and we need some color. We need some orange. There it is. And already, if you look, this area, it's almost done. I feel like I have too many sections of line, so I need to move my fields a little bit up and down, make them curvy so I don't have lines climbing. So do you see how I created darker, lighter, and darker again? So I'm gonna push some of the light up or some of the darkness down, so I create not so predictable of lines and fields. And then from here I'm gonna move a little bit up on the trees, and I'm gonna use a little bit of white with that orange, so I'm lightening it, making it lighter. And now I have to make sure every time when I look back to my art, if I'm creating something that is like way too uniform, we don't want that. We don't want to be predictable. We don't want to see predictable brush strokes or fields, unless we want to do it that way, but that's not what I want to do. So I'm gonna have to break my lines a little bit. So let's see if I am accomplishing this. A little bit of the bluish gray. Too much. So remember what we do, too much, I'll just touch it with my finger, and I'll continue. A little bit more purple. So I'm gonna go back red, and it's the primary red and the blue. It gives you much darker purple. If you want that nice bright purple, you want to use magenta. You want to use magenta instead of the primary red. So for your different type of purple, now when I want a shadowy purple, I will use the primary red and ultramarine or any blue. Really, seriously, with the blue I'm not so worried. The red is what makes the huge difference. And in my little brown area where the water is meeting, I am going to add some of that purple, because purple is the color of our shadows. And again, I'm trying to create a line, but not to be super predictable. So you see I have spots that are a little darker. I skip an area and I'll apply it a little bit down. And also I'm gonna use that to get in here and pretend there is like a branch or something, much deeper shadow. I'm gonna wash my brush, and with almost washed brush, I'm gonna go in and add more branches. There it is. I see that. So very impressionistic. That's Monet for you. And I will go a little bit darker green, but again, I'm taking the color, but I'm wiping it so it's not super strong color. And I'm gonna apply. This is the set that I have been using for now for 4 months. The lowest color I have is Ocher, which I will put aside because I'm gonna use it. And what I want to get from here is the olive green. So the olive green is gonna give me that muted feeling of a green. So it's not a bright green, it's a darker muted green, and I want to use it. That's what it is. And I'm gonna apply a few little specks and spots. So I can be applying all the dots coming straight down on the canvas, but then I'm gonna create again a predictable brush stroke. So from time to time I'm gonna use more of the side of the brush, and sometimes I'm gonna go straight down and give it more like a pound, like give a little brush strokes that are tiny dots, and some of them will be straight down on the canvas. I love the olive green, and I'm gonna use a little more right at the base of my foliage. And I think I can leave it. So the reason why I'm gonna leave it is because we're in a good place. Can we go, and I'm gonna get a little umber, if I can open it. This happens when you don't clean your paints after you use them, and color gets all around. So if I'm being good to my paints, I'll go and clean this after I paint, but I haven't done this, so I think I'm gonna have to do it today, or that paint is going to lock for me and I'm not going to be able to open it, because the smaller it gets, the harder it is to open. I'm getting my umber, and I'm going to add a little bit of that. The umber is almost like, it's a beige color, so it's like orange with brown pretty much. You can create something like an umber, but umber is one of those colors that I use tons of it, and especially when I'm observing Monet or Van Gogh and few of the old world artists, I just see that color a lot. Okay, so we're gonna leave this for now, just because we can. And we are going to leave it alone, give it a rest. We'll come back to it. And now my brush strokes in the water, the closer they are to me, the bigger they will be, and the further away, the smaller and less details. So I have an area that's reflecting. So what I'm gonna do is those colors that I just created in my palette, they have to be even more muted, but I have to transition them to my water and leave a little spots here and there for the movement of the water, for the waves. Because if we have waves, the wave is lifting, so now our reflection is not going to be facing us, because the element that it's casting that shadow is further away from us. Now if our element is behind us, the reflection will be different. But because the element is here, our water lift, the little tiny movement of the water, the waves that are lifting on our side, they'll have a dark and a light, because the dark will be the shadow. When a little wave is lifting, it creates a shadow underneath. Then we have the light that it's hitting the top of that wave, and the reflection will fall behind, which we will not see. But the reflection on much flatter surface, obviously we're gonna see it. Too much information maybe, I don't know. So I'm going to get those colors, and with a little bit more water on my brush, I'm going to just move around and deposit little sideways brush strokes. So do you see how I'm moving? Our water, it's horizontal surface. with the sky, you can have movement back and forward, but with our water, we are going to be moving from left to right. This line on his painting is coming straight at us, even though this has a an angle. This one's coming straight, so probably the light is from one side, not straight from the front. Then I'm gonna go back to, I have to use very, very light colors and fill in the water. Leave brush strokes present. Don't try to take them away. That's the whole idea. A little bit of purple. So, and this is how we're gonna tell where our land is starting and our water is starting, because the brush strokes will create that illusion. We have a little bit more of a sideways movement even in the reflection, still leaving dots, but constantly I am trying to spread some of those brush strokes from left to right or right to left. So I'm gonna get a little bit of the raw umber, too strong. So I'm gonna take water before it dries and I'm just going to take away. I'm gonna do this again because now I took away too much. So when we paint, if something is not happening right away, just play around with it. It's your playboard, it's playtime. I'm gonna take a little bit of the greens back in here and slowly transition to a darker and darker color. I don't have to rush this to get from A to Z. I have all those letters in between to make things happen. And the gardeners are making so much noise, but what can you do? It's I'm going back and forward and I am making this far water a little bit less choppier, and the closer I'm getting to this area, the choppier I will be and the bigger brush strokes. So his brush strokes are not that big, so what I'm gonna do is I'll smooth it out. Brush. So if I have this size brush strokes right here, the next ones and the next one have to shrink down because closer, everything is closer, it's bigger, appears bigger to us, and everything that it's far away, it's much, much smaller. Let's get some of that here. Take some white, and what I'm gonna do with this extra paint that I have poured in, so my white is really not a clean white, it's like a bluish grayish white, but it will work for my purpose. And applying some of that right here. There's like a bigger blotch, smaller little spots. Perfect. I'll get a little more paint on the tip of my brush, so it's like I'm depositing more paint. making the brush strokes a little bit thicker, closer to me. And moving it in a horizontal manner. Get a little greenish right here. I just see a little bit of that yellow again in the water. Tiny bit, so I'm trying to like deposit and take away at the same time, so it's not overwhelming. It is a river, so it's not as blue as in ocean water, but we don't want to make it like a swamp. So I'm gonna take darker blue, mix it a little bit with my pre-created purple, so it's not gonna be a purple, but it's going to be purplish blue. And I'll add a little bit deeper color on some of those waves underneath. Tiny, tiny. So with this, we can go forever playing. He has tons of lines coming close, and even a little more purplish to my blue. Yep, that's it. Still blue. It's a purplish blue. Okay. Looking back and forward. Gonna take some white. Gonna go back. So my brush is at this point is never clean, and I'm going to deposit some of that white. And if you see how when I'm depositing some of the white, it's actually too blue. Let's wash a little more. Sometimes will help if there is more color. Sometimes you're just gonna have to wash it. So my my little coverage of the surface with that gray, it helped dramatically. Let's do that sailboat because let's get it more white. So my sailboat is right here. So we have one side that it's curved. This part is lifted and this part is coming down. That's pretty much it. And now I'm going to get an angle brush or flat brush, whatever it's good for you. I'm gonna get a little bit of the red, wipe it, and add a little bit of a bottom on that sailboat. A line right here. A few lines coming down. Get a little white. A few brush strokes of white. Whatever is left in my brush, I'm gonna just try to just rub a little bit more of a color here. You see, a lot of times I didn't know I'm gonna do that. It just happens and you just go with the flow. And that's the beauty of art. You just experiment, see what works, take things away, add some more, and have fun with it. Too much, take away. I'm adding a little bit more. Let's add a little more reddish. And more reddish. I noticed in some of his paintings, the reflection in the water, it's much brighter than the whatever it's reflecting. which was very interesting because I was probably going to tone down. Let's add a little bit of yellow here. And you see how I try to, those 3 areas that I created, now I have this one, but I have a little lift here, so I'm breaking that area. And also now this don't seem too much like fields, different fields. So let's add more brush strokes. So we're gonna go between gray and kind of a bluish gray. So we have the kind of a colder, because our sky is colder, gray, and then we're going to get a little bit less of a cold gray. Gonna add a little bit of bluish and actually bluish purplish. So I'm using a gray color, but you can create gray with white and black, so it doesn't have to be gray color. And depending on obviously how much black you put in, it's gonna be darker or lighter. And I rather make my own colors. If I'm using a purple, I rather make my purple because it gives me more different variations of that color than just using the color in a tube directly from the tube. Now you can do that too. There's nothing wrong with anything when you're doing art. Pretty much everything goes. Like whatever makes you happy, just do it. And if you have a color in a tube, you can still add a little bit more. Let's say if you have the purple, you add blue, or you add a little bit of red, or you add white. So absolutely, if somebody tells you not to do something in art, turn around and find somebody else, because there should never be rules or confinements in creating art. It should be just an open field and the sky is your limits. That's it. That's how I feel, and it's okay if you feel differently. It's all good. Experiment with different artists, see what speaks to you. There's so many great people, and I watch tons of artists on Facebook too. And sometimes I'm like, wow, this person is painting amazingly. I wish I can do that. But if it's not my style, obviously I'm going to torture myself to create that. So I'm starting to notice that I made this a little bit too perfect. So I'm gonna go in and take some of those areas out and create more of an uneven side here. And I can go, and I'm using white, but the white is transparent, so when I'm using it, whatever it's behind, it's gonna pop a little bit, so it's gonna give me more dimension. And if I feel like I took something a little bit too far away, I'm gonna add. And since I added this, and it looks pretty different, I'm gonna add a little bit here and a little bit some other places. So now I'm marrying the picture together. This area here has a little more greenish. Let's find our olive green and a little bit of the orange. It's gonna give me a beautiful color. Beautiful color. So the orange, which actually is, let me pull my colors. What did I use? It's probably a it is cadmium yellow. So I just wanted to make sure, because I have this huge box, and what I'm using today is, I barely used today the Winston Newton paints, and I have been using the Blick. Pretty good consistency. I am happy with their paints. Super happy. Actually, I'll prefer to buy Blick than Basics. I don't like the consistency as much. Some people like it. That's personal thing. So when you're experimenting with paint, and this is a studio, this is like student grade, so it's not top notch, but honestly, it's holding pretty good for the way I paint. I'm happy with this paint. There is much more expensive paints. Go buy some. I have had expensive, cheap, whatever, and for some reason it just seems that the Blick works for me. I also love the Winston Newton. This is another brand that I love, from their acrylics to everything else. And in the links, I have links below in the description. In the links description below, I just did tons of words backwards, inside out. All right, so let's tone down that yellow. So I worked on this area, left it alone. I am gonna come back to it because it just seemed like something's missing, and the color was either too, it's kind of funny, it seems like too much. So I'm gonna try to tone down with that olive green, and I think I'm using, what did I put in? I think the cadmium yellow with the olive green and some white. And it's giving me a more muted yellow. And I want some purple, but more white in my purple, more white. So again, it's a muted purple. And I'm going to apply a little bit. I'm just looking back and forward. He has tons of purple, especially on the top parts of those trees. A little bit right here. Orange. I picked up orange. That's okay. So that's what happens when you do a little boo-boo. It's so good. I'll wash it. It might even be a beautiful thing. Who knows? I'm gonna go back to my color, and I am going to go back and forward looking at his painting, my painting. I am not trying to make it exactly the same. It's just, it's not me to do that. I'm happy when I'm really close. But I don't try to put every single spot exactly where he has it with exact color, because I'm not trying to do a reproduction. I am trying to get inspired. I don't know if you can understand what I'm trying to explain. I hope you do. And now a little bit of the same color, but a little lighter, and just dab few little spots next, or a little bit over the purplish areas that I just went through. And now that gives me a little bit more of a depth. I'm gonna go back to my yellow. It's a mixture between a yellow, umber, and I'm gonna put some white. Let's move this right here. So I have these colors on my brush. A little more umber in it. Let's take a little bit of the burn umber. Actually, that's ochre. I'm thinking about something, saying something different. It's always fun. And add a little bit of that in a few areas. Let's do it right here. And last week I painted his lemons, and they turned so dark, and I didn't realize that they were dark until my husband got home and asked me, because he usually can see what I have on my screen. and looks back and forward, and he's like, why is your lemon so dark? And I just looked and I'm like, well, I guess I was in a different type of a mood. I didn't see it as dark when I was painting it, which is always kind of fun to see when you're kind of in the zone and you're doing a thing without putting too much thinking in it. Okay, let's get a little bit of a reddish purplish. And I'm gonna just add a few spots. Let me enlarge that area. I just want to see. Yeah, again, like I remember last time I went too much in details, and when I blew up his picture, I'm like, there is not that much details. I need to stop. So I need to stop. Let's get a little white here. And just clean up a little bit because I think I went a little bit too much in details. A little more white. And break some of those areas. More white. So that's gonna help because that is a little drier. And let's see this area here. Oh, it almost looks like palette knives and brushes. So this looks seriously to me like somebody got a dry brush and just went that way on the sky and made it happen. Somebody, Monet, and just made it happen, and it's amazing and beautiful. And I think I'm gonna just observe for 1 second. I need a little bit more of an orangey, fiery orangey, so I'm gonna pop this orange here and this cadmium yellow. And I'm just going to add a little bit of water, a little bit of that here, and also add a little bit of that here. This area we have a little more brownish but reddish brown, so let's add a little orange to my brown. Is that what I want to see? Let's add a little red. I think the orange was better, so I'm gonna go back to orange. Let's tone it down with orange. A little bit and actually wash so the brush is transparent. Add some of the spots right here. Yep, and I do see some black in right this area, just a little bit. Okay, so I think we're good. I think we could be very close to being done, so I'll leave it. I'll look at it later. I might decide to touch something or not. Let's add a little bit more to the sail here. And there is a person. Oh my gosh, I just saw a tiny little dot for the head and the body. Let's put, and his one hand is up and he's standing on the boat. Okay, that is cute. That is too adorable. Of course we had to put a person there. I mean, seriously. I will leave it here. I'm looking at his like up close, and again I feel like I added too much brush strokes comparing his. So I'm gonna turn this sideways, and obviously if you're right-handed, it's gonna be backwards because I'm gonna be writing from top to bottom. It's pretty much like doing it Chinese way. And only barely touching the canvas. D-A down. All right, well here it is. We're gonna leave Mr. Monet right here. This is the painting. It took us an hour and 20 minutes, and I start enlarging his original just to see up close his brush strokes, and I feel like I have added too much brush strokes comparing his, but we'll leave it here. I'll be looking at it and I'll see. I probably will not correct this one. I might decide to paint this again just to make myself understand this a little bit better, but I'll leave it right here. Thanks for watching, and I hope you liked the video. If you did, give us thumbs up, and we'll see you next week, same place. Thanks, bye.